Hello, and welcome to the ninth episode of the Powerless Podcast. Thanks for listening, whether it's the first episode you've listened to or you've listened to a couple of the other ones in the past, whether it's with the musicians I've talked to or the few kind of political commentators or community organizers I've spoken to. I appreciate you listening. So I talk to musicians, songwriters, producers, etc., as well as, like I said, people in the social political sphere. This episode, I talked to Kelsey Montanez, who is a singer-songwriter out of the Chicago area. Very talented when it comes to writing, to the music she's put out, and very talented live as well. I've had the opportunity to play just a few shows with Kelsey as her kind of interim bass player right before the pandemic hit. So I kind of got to see that firsthand and how good she is live. So I do encourage you, if you ever get a chance, to go check her out in the Chicago area, if she plays elsewhere in the future. But we talk about her kind of trajectory from her start in music at an early age to when she got signed after, putting out her first EP and kind of working with Chance the Rapper on a song, to kind of, deciding to be an independent artist, falling away from music for a while, coming back, and how in some ways COVID and lockdowns and the kind of really cool job that we get into that she had, involving being kind of a music resident during the pandemic times, kind of reinvigorated her passion for music. So we talk about all of that. We talk about the issues sometimes that face up and coming musicians or unfortunately, especially female musicians in the world, and the expectations and pressures that are thrown on them, in that kind of vein of pop music or being signed to a record label. We talk about the new song she put out, Sold My Soul, which kind of ties in that whole story. And it's a song she wrote years ago. So we get into all that and the lyrical content of that. We talk about her upcoming shows that she'll be playing with her live band, two of which, and two of the people in her band I'm pretty good friends with, Matt and Mike, so shout out to them. I think the shows would be really good. The first one is this upcoming Saturday on January 21st at Reggie's in Chicago. So if you're in the Illinois area and you hear this, make sure to check that out. They're also playing the Cubby Bear coming up pretty soon. I think they said late February or early March, or they said St. Patty's weekend. I think they're playing at the Cubby Bear, so that should be a good time as well in Wrigleyville in Chicago. So just make sure to check those things out if you have a chance, or if you're not from the area, at least check out Kelsey's new song, Sold My Soul, which is absolutely fantastic. We dive into that one and a lot more. So again, I appreciate you guys listening. If you want to find out where that show is or details on it, as well as where to find Kelsey, you can just look her up at Kelsey Montanez _ on Instagram. And you can find all of her last 3 singles she's put out over the past year on Spotify, Apple Music, etc. And if you want to contact me or reach me, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at thepowerlesspod. You can also find this podcast on any other streaming platform, but obviously if you're listening to it, you already know where that's at. And you can reach me at through email at thepowerlesspod@gmail.com if you want to be on the show, or you have critiques, or just want to tell me what you like about the show, what you didn't like about the show. I'm always here for some constructive criticism, as this is very early on and I still have no idea what the hell I'm doing. But again, I appreciate you listening. And without further ado, here is Kelsey Montanez, singer and songwriter of the Chicago area, on the Powerless Podcast. Thanks, Kelsey, for coming on for the Powerless Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I've been excited to have you on for a couple different reasons. One, obviously since it's been a pandemic since we've seen each other, but I got to play a little bit with you guys, and the shows were always really fun, and the practices were great. And you're obviously a very talented singer, songwriter, and live musician, and everything else. And I just think you have a cool story when it comes to music. So I think that's always something interesting for people to hear, kind of like your start, all the way back, I guess it's from what I was reading today and the other day when I was getting some notes together a decade ago, right? Really
Mhm.
when things started kind
I
of
know
going off, which is crazy.
it is. When I think about it, I'm like, "Oh my god, a decade has passed." But yeah,
Yeah,
it's been
right.
a
Like
long time.
that's wild. It just shows, I guess, how old we are, right? No, I'm just
Mhm.
kidding. But
No.
so I figured we would talk today a bit. Obviously, you just put out a new song. Um, I sold my soul, which I had heard before. Obviously, we had played that a
Mhm.
little bit in the past, but I loved hearing the recording of it. It sounds really great. So we can get into that a little bit. Some of the other, I know you've put out at least two singles prior to that on Spotify, right? And
Mhm.
kind of go from there to kind of what's been inspiring you, the last decade or so with music. Your start with I know there was like a record label and some craziness there involved. But I thought we would start with the new song you put out. So for anyone that hasn't checked this out before, Kelsey Montanez is a singer songwriter out of Chicago. Really talented lyricist and songwriter and live performer. And the last year you've put out the first songs you've put out in about a decade, right? Is
Yeah.
that is that is that the case? Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
officially. I mean, I've been
Officially, right?
writing for years, but yeah, it's been officially putting music out, it's been quite a while.
Yeah. So, and I think this song, at least from what I can tell from the lyrics and kind of knowing your story a little bit, it kind of coincides with um, a bit of your first kind of journey with music and kind of getting found from your first EP you put out in 2013 and all that. So, kind of for anybody that hasn't heard it or doesn't know much about you, can you kind of tell people what the song's a bit about and kind of the story there?
Yeah, so it's called I Sold My Soul. Um, I was still in high school when I wrote it, but it was kind of like I mean, I've been doing music for a long like since I was like a child, you know. My dad was a musician, and so he kind of like showed me the ropes at a very early age. And right when I like started kind of involving myself in the music scene in high school, it was like I was already bombarded with like so much toxic messaging from the music industry, just about like you think about it, I'm in high school and I was being
Right.
told constantly that just like that I had to change my sound, I had to write different styles of music, I had to lose weight, I had to wear more makeup and wear tighter clothes, and like it was just kind of like culture shock, like like I was just trying to write some songs and play with my band. And so that kind of idea is how I Sold My Soul was born. um and honestly, sadly, like I still can relate. I do think it's gotten a lot better, but I've always just felt like that song meant a lot to me, and I still feel like it resonates even as an adult. So I decided to record it and put it on the album. I felt like it had to be on the album.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that does speak a lot to what you're saying, that it is unfortunately a little bit of a timeless song with how music industry can be. Obviously for anybody, but let alone a young up and coming female artist that gets signed. I mean you like to think that that's kind of like movie-fied when they kind of say those things and just how
It's real.
crazy the industry can be, but it's absolutely real, um across genres, across major record or even some indie record label scenes, especially back then, but even now. So no, I mean it makes a lot of sense to put it out on the album. I also like to hear that there is an album coming, so that's cool. So what has have you I know the song it just came out last week, right? How's the
Mhm.
reception been for it? I noticed it already, within less than a week it was like 1200, 1300 plays, I think, on Spotify alone, which is really cool for putting out a single, right in the beginning of the year. So what's the reception been like for it?
I've been very pleasantly surprised. It's been pretty incredible. There's been so many blogs that have picked it up and wrote about it, and so many people sharing it and commenting. Like it's kind of overwhelming, you know. Like
Yeah.
I mean, the first two songs. were good. The reception was good as well. But I feel like this one kind of like tipped it over the edge, and I'm noticing so much more. I don't know if it's just that it resonates with people, but like people just really feel connected to it, and it's pretty incredible just how much it's circulating around so
Yeah.
fast. You know, it's not even a week old, and I feel like it's really like made its rounds, and it's pretty awesome to watch, and I'm super grateful.
Well, that's great to hear because again, it helps that it's got a hell of a melody and a hook to it, and it's actually like good lyrically, right? Like those are two things that sometimes in music some people have to go either or, but it's nice that it's kind of got a really good message, and it's if no one's paying attention to the lyrics, you're still going to want to save it and re-listen to it. So that's a great thing. To kind of transition from that, you already mentioned it a bit, especially with the content of the song, but to go back with you a little bit, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, and you mentioned, your dad's a musician. Music's been in your life pretty much your whole life. When did playing music for you kind of start? What were some, whether it was like a rock band or a pop singer, like even for me, somebody that plays like metal a lot, like one of my first big, you know, um, musicians or groups that got me into music was like boy bands and stuff, right? So like you never know. But what first got you really inspired with music, and what kind of got you first writing your own songs?
I have my dad to thank for that. Since I was really little, I mean, he was always in bands and writing music, and he, when I was really young, kind of started collecting like recording, equipment. And um, one of the things that we would bond over is like, he would pick me up for the weekends. My parents were divorced, and I'd go over there, and he would just like sit, like bust out the guitar and start like, strumming different chords. And he'd be like, just sing something, like anything that comes to your mind. And I was like, I would just whatever a 6-year-old is thinking about.
Right.
And then it kind of evolved into like him recording those ideas. And so I always like grew up with this like, just writing and recording music. And then it got to the point like, high school age, I started really taking writing serious. I was writing songs before that, like even in middle school. It started off with my dad, like sometimes he would come up with these little like keyboard riffs or whatever and record it and be like, here, I wrote, this, I have this little demo song. You want to write some lyrics to it? And I would like, throughout the week, go home from school and like sit and listen to it and write lyrics down in my little notebook. And then the weekend would come and we'd start recording. And so it was just like routine for me
Hmm.
growing up of just like creating, expressing, writing. And then when I got older, I really started to take it more seriously, and it became such an important outlet for me.
Right.
Um, and then I just got immersed in like music and music culture, and like, just I don't know, it's the love of my life. I fell in love with it. But to what you were saying, I was absolutely like, I wasn't so much the boy bands, but I was all about the Spice Girls,
Yeah.
Mandy Moore, Britney Spears, like Christina Aguilera, like all that. It was like I grew up on that for sure.
Well, and like, not bagging on the boy bands because of course there's some good singers in those groups, I'm sure. Well, we know that from some of the ones that went on with Solar Cruise and stuff, but a lot of those, a lot, to go back a little bit on what you're talking about with your new single, like a lot of those singers, not saying that they wouldn't have made the songs they made regardless or anything else, but like they were, fantastic vocalists too. So, you say
Mhm.
Christina Aguilera as an example, like, I mean, the voice that she has is like, absolutely incredible and everything else. So, even big pop stars aside, there's something to be said of just being
Oh, I was
drawn to like,
singing to Christina Aguilera, like,
yeah.
I had this little bookshelf and I would clear out, like, the books because, like, the sound would bounce back and I thought it sounded better, and I would just, like, sit there and, like, sing Christina Aguilera
Right,
into the shelf,
especially
like,
even
all the
like you'd see her when she first was early on. You literally do this, like that's what every
Yes.
little kid was doing when they were listening to. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, that's so yeah. So you get into pop music. You've been writing songs off and on from middle school, getting a little more serious in high school. What happened between kind of getting more serious with it in high school, maybe playing shows or playing in a band or whatever, and kind of that first EP coming out? Like what were you working? I know you. Who were you working with, or like what was kind of the growth period there in that regard?
Yeah, so I was playing out a lot, basically like high school, and then out of high school, I went on this like long road trip right out of high school instead of going to college. I was like, I'm gonna like pack up my '94 Toyota Corolla and drive around the country and play music anywhere I can. And
Hmm.
basically that's what I did, which was when I look back was like probably really stupid, but
But
um
awesome at the same time, right? Yeah.
it was cool. Like I had no plan, no money. I literally just it was so naive and so ridiculous. And I'm so glad that like I didn't die or like get kidnapped on that trip. But I did. I drove around and I played in like dive bars everywhere. And then it got to the point where I was like, all right, I need to like come back and like, figure out my next move. And basically just like through friends and networking, like I started talking to this small label, um and it kind of just it was interesting because it talking to the label, like I've always been more of like a rocker, like just like rock and roll blues, like it's always just kind of been like where I naturally move towards when I write. But this producer started kind of like giving me like demos of like more it was like more R&B soul
Hmm.
kind of stuff. And I originally thought I would be writing for other artists, like just kind of
Oh.
we were just like kind of feeling things out, and I
Hmm.
thought the EP that I was going to do was going to be more like my stuff.
Hmm.
But it kind of just like turned into this, it just moved into a different direction. And then um Chance the rapper was recording in the same studio that I was working in, and from what I was told, he heard like a demo that we were like recording and thought it sounded good and like
Hmm.
wanted to hop on it. And so that's kind of how that happened. And then yeah, I don't know. And then that EP we released it. I feel like, I stand behind it. I think it was a solid EP, but it wasn't I think I was still finding my voice back then. I was
Of course.
19 at the time, and
Right.
um it's like I had still a lot to learn about the music industry. I still had a lot to learn about like who I am and like my own like musical voice and the style of music that I want to do. And I think now it's like this the direction I'm moving in now is like a little bit more real and raw and like true to who I am and true to who I've always been. Like I love being versatile in all styles and genres of music, but there's something like my heart just is just in rock and roll. Like just I like like singing in that kind of like aggressive style. I like
Yeah.
that, and I also, like to sing in a more like R&B sultry style as well, but yeah, I'm excited about this record because it's all like real instrumentation.
Right.
We're kind of like taking it back to the old school. It's not a lot of like program sounds. It's I'm bringing in like real like session musicians, and I really wanted to have that kind of like raw organic feel. And I feel like this is something, even though I've always like played rock shows like this, it's something I've never actually done like in the studio. So it's super exciting for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say for the newest single, "I Sold My Soul." I mean, it really, you kind of hit the nail on the head that it feels not, and I mean this in a good way. Like it feels old school sounding. You know what I mean? Like even some of the kind of lead guitar parts. Because I noticed that because I'm a guitar player and half a bassist. So I was listening to some of the interludes and like it feels very like someone plugged it in and cranked it, right? Which is
Yeah,
clearly what you want to do. And it sounds
yeah,
great. It still sounds high quality at the same time, which is great, which is a really cool thing to be able to go in a studio and kind of do it in that more natural feel. Because like even a lot of rock bands now, you bring up program sound and all that kind of stuff. Even a lot of more modern rock bands, like there's a lot of programming, there's a lot of MIDI, there's a lot of, putting things to a grid or whatever else. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just like you said, like I'm for all sounds, like I do that music that I do or whatever. But like, it is so cool to just like hear somebody put out a song 2022, 2023 that like feels as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like vintage, but new, you know what I mean? And like,
yeah.
that's how that song feels like production wise. So that's really cool.
That's
Um,
awesome. I love that. Yeah, and I'm like a big fan too of like having like like being in the room when it's being recorded, like, because now it's like so easy. People can just track things on their computer and send you the track, and and like, but there's a certain magic I feel like happens when you're like in the room recording in a studio, and like you're coming up with ideas, and like, it's like, yeah, this project is taking longer than I think, is what's typical of like music that's being recorded today. But I feel like, I don't mind that, because I do feel like there is something organic that's happening, because it is all that's not program stuff. It's not like tracked. It's like being recorded in the studio, like face to face. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I appreciate you saying that, because that's like
Yeah.
definitely what I'm trying to go for.
Well, and it's a cool thing to do, like, purposefully too, because like you just mentioned, especially with the way music comes out now, with streaming services and everything else. And like, I'm just saying this from other artists I've talked to over the past couple of weeks when I started this. People feel like they have to constantly like bust out content and constantly like be present on the online with every insert social media here kind of deal. And bands that are road warriors sometimes feel like they have to like make a new video or put out songs so like assembly line, like and unfortunately that's where a lot of, I feel like, the more modern like grid tracking, MIDI tracking, programming, all that kind of stuff can come from. And again, there's a way to do that that's awesome, and when people want to do that, that's cool. But when people feel forced to meet a timeline, or forced to just continue hit the ground running as opposed to doing what they want to do, like that just kind of sucks, right? So it's definitely a cool thing that you get to do what you want to do with your recordings, for sure. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. I mean, even just like, I have no idea what I'm doing as far as like social media. I don't know how TikTok works. Like, I feel like
You and
way,
me both, yeah.
way in the past when it comes to stuff like that. And like, sometimes I feel like the pressure of it, but at the same time, like, I don't know. It's like I'm just focused on making good music, making it the best that I possibly can right now, and like working within the means that I have.
Right.
And it's it seems to be working. It seemed like, it's making its rounds. I'm getting a lot of good like press on it. So, I mean, I don't know. It could just be like, I feel like eventually I do need to figure out how the internet works, but
just
I don't
just
know.
find
There's
somebody to do it for you. That's the real way
Yeah,
to go,
no, that's probably what's gonna have to happen, because I'm like clueless. Like, I don't know how technology works. I'm shocked that I was able to get onto this podcast. I mean, but it's just like, I think that's another thing that's like freeing right now, is that I'm doing this completely independently, completely on my own. Like, so I don't have a label. I don't have like deadlines to meet. Like, I'm just doing this just because I love it and I want to.
Right, right.
And so the pressure's kind of off. Like, I'm able to make quality and focus on like, making these songs the best that I can before releasing them.
Absolutely. And it's like, to go back to what you were just saying and what I was rambling on a little bit, like, people feel like with content creation and social media and the digital age of music now, that now more than ever, right, that like you have to constantly be there, or people kind of forget about you, because there is so much music and there's so much going on, and let's be honest, people's attention spans are like that of a squirrel, right, when it comes to stuff online, or checking out music or whatever else, whether it's Spotify or going to social media with TikTok or whatever. But like, having good songs and being good live is still the best way to be a musician. At the end of the day, like you could be somebody that's on it when it comes to social media, or somebody that's on it when it comes to putting out an EP a year, or whatever. People sometimes do more than that. It blows my mind. But like, if you're not, if you're doing all that, but it's all kind of fabricated, and you're just hustling, and one, you're not enjoying yourself and you're burning yourself out before your first tour, or like, you don't sound good live after all the music you've put out and the following you have, like it doesn't matter. So like, at the end of the day, doing what you want to do with your music, doing it well, and being great live, I think, are still some of the best ways to be a musician, whether it's whether it's a part-time gig, or whether you want to make it your full-time career, like that's still a big, the biggest piece of it, in my opinion. I don't
Yeah.
know what the hell I'm talking about either,
And
but like I
I
think
mean,
that's the
I
case,
think
you know?
one of the biggest lessons I've learned too is it's so important to also pace yourself. Like you don't, like you said, you don't want to burn yourself out too fast. Because a creative process, you really want to make sure that you have the longevity to keep
Hmm.
creating, to keep performing. I've really had to like work on that. Like I never used to do vocal warm-ups when I was younger. I would just get on stage and scream it out and like I didn't take good care of myself. Like I wanted too much too fast. I would just and I think I worked with the wrong people and I got involved with the wrong things because I was just like I burnt myself out so hard where I couldn't even make music for years. And now I'm realizing like you know, you have to learn things in stages and go in stages. And, it's like, and I feel like doing quality work at every level, like, even if you're not at the level that you ultimately foresee yourself being in, but, staying grounded, taking care of yourself, and putting quality time and effort into every stage of it, the writing, the performing, the recording, like everything needs your care and attention. If you want to just blast people with music nonstop and play countless shows without really like working out your live show, like it's like in the long run, you're going to be putting out subpar work and you're going to be exhausted
Hmm.
and you're not going to have the creative engine to keep up with it, So I'm realizing that like really pacing yourself is looking at the long game.
Absolutely. Well, and to go back to the burnout thing a bit, and everything you said there is spot on in my opinion. Like if you make it a job, if you just make it another job, then it's just another job, right? Like there's nothing worse than taking like a passion thing, whether it's visual art, and not to say there's not job aspects of it when it comes to a point, of course there always is, right? But whether you're a great, visual artist or a musician or, whatever other form of passion project people can have, like if you wake up one day and you just like don't want to do it because it's been too much work and you're not enjoying yourself, like there's nothing worse than that, to like find the thing that you loved like has now become just like what it used to be when you worked a job that was shit or something. So yeah, I mean like all
I've
that
been there.
is, yeah, oh
Sucks.
yeah, right. I'm sure like whether it's a day-to-day job or people's music careers, when they're just on the grind or like at a certain point where it just feels like such a, I don't know, like such a marathon, that, it's good to just pace yourself, do
Hmm.
things correctly, do things when you can and when you're, not to be this like child, but when you're feeling it, right? Like just, that's, I think that's the best way to go. Cause like, again, clearly that's worked for you in the sense of like these last couple of singles you've put out. There's not this, it's not like any of them have lost any passion or any, edge to them. They're all very, very good. And so, if it takes this long, it takes this long. The product is worth it. Right.
Hmm.
So you mentioned an album, which is cool to hear. How if you don't mind talking about this at all, since it's not out yet, you haven't announced anything. What's the process been like for that? Is it some of the songs that you've recorded or you've written in the past? Is a lot more of like newer ones that you maybe wrote when we were all sitting around during COVID? Is it a mix of both? And what's kind of your direction with that?
Yeah, it is kind of a mix of both. It's still like I'm so deep in the process that and it's I feel like it's changing all the time and it's
Hmm.
taking shape as I work on it. Like I don't like it's like I have a handful of songs demoed out and I'm just about to start on a batch of two more.
Oh, cool.
Um but I don't know. It's like I'm kind of just it's all like instinct right now. Like I'm kind of just like whenever I feel like a song I need to record it, I'm just kind of trusting my instinct on it. Like I felt like
Hmm.
that with I Sold My Soul, which was one of the first like only old ones I really felt like, okay, you know what? I feel like I need to bring that one back out of the closet. Like it it has drive, it's alive, like people really like it at the live show. And because this is technically my first album, it's kind of like I'm digging deep, like, okay, because I've been writing a lot and I'm like, I do have all this new material, but there's a few songs that I just don't want to forget about that like I feel like just means so much to me. And I know through the years, like playing out live and stuff, like they really resonate with people. So I'm like, well, if I do a whole album of all new stuff, what are the chances that the second album I'm gonna go way back? Like I almost feel like I have to
Right.
play catch up because I haven't released anything in so long.
Uh-huh.
So I'm kind of feeling it out as I go. But I think there's gonna be just a couple old ones, and then most of it is gonna be new stuff.
Well, that's cool. One, I mean, just do a 30 track double record. It'll be fine,
Yeah.
right?
I
Like, yeah.
I have material. God, I have like thousands of
I was gonna
songs.
say, at least from the time, for anyone that's, I played just a few shows with Kelsey and her band, right before COVID, like a year or two before, just filling in on bass, and you had no. You had a plethora of songs there that were, I know most of them were a bit older ones that you guys had
Mhm.
played together, in your past kind of shows that you'd done together. Those songs are all great. So at the end of the, I thought they were all really solid still, coming up on 2018, 2019, whenever that was. It feels like an eternity ago now,
I
right? But,
know.
you know, the thing is, it's like you could save those songs too and put a few of them on the second record, revamp them, whatever. There's no
Yeah.
rules to this. Doesn't matter what the hell you're doing, right? But it's also really cool that you've been able to write so much lately and have so many new songs too. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Did a lot of that come from kind of the pandemic era of our lives, of being probably stuck in an apartment or a house and a guitar and just kind of
Yeah.
sitting there riffing for a long time?
2020 completely changed my life. Like, I know a lot of people feel this way. Like, it was just like a reset for so many reasons. I wasn't doing music before that, like barely. I wasn't writing. It was just a wild like. So it was that it was. I think it was the isolation. Um, I, was working a lot before that. I was just like not, I was burning myself out all the time. I was in school and I honestly thought music was dead and gone. I thought my music days were over. Um, I missed it. I longed for it like every single day of my life. Like literally like the feeling of being heartbroken. Like I missed music but I didn't think that it would come back because wasn't I was in such a writer's block for so long that I just kind of got used to like the idea of like, all right, maybe this is like isn't my path. But COVID hit. I was working in a restaurant. And my restaurant had to close, obviously. All restaurants closed. And I like suddenly had all this massive amounts of alone time. And I started just like writing little, songs here and there. And then I started posting like out of boredom. I just started posting like little cover songs and stuff just on the internet. Like I didn't think anything of it. But then because I did that, it got into the hands of. So I did this music residency in downtown Chicago
Hmm.
at the Aqua Building. It's like an iconic hotel. And they have this really cool program where they bring in like a singer songwriter every year and a half. And you get to live there for free and you perform around the high rise, and they have different buildings downtown, and so like you
That's
perform like,
awesome.
poolside. Yeah, it was so cool. So a family friend submitted the video that I just randomly posted, um, and they liked it, and they were like, what?" At this point we were pretty deep in COVID, but everybody thought that it was only going to be like 3 months. This is when everyone was like, "Oh, it's going to be over." And so they were like, "Well, let's just move an artist in, and in 3 months, when this is over and everybody's ready to like party and have fun, we'll have the musician in residence." And like so when my mom's friend called me and told me that they wanted to offer me the gig, I was like blown away, and I was like, I don't have 3 hours worth of material, because the shows were like 3 hours. I'm like,
Right.
I don't know how I'm going to do this. And it was in a month. They were like, are you cool to like move in next month? And I was like, I was so scared, but it changed my life because I had to get back into the routine of making music every single week. I had 3 shows, because that's basically what the contract is. It's about 3 shows a week. And because of that, because I didn't have to work and I had all this like downtime, and it was pretty like I was on the 44th floor, like overlooking Lake Michigan. Like it was so surreal. And I got to work and I started writing and like, because whenever there's a guitar in my hands, like it's just, I will just write. Like it just happens. But it was such a soft spot. It was like it was a wound. I didn't touch the guitar because I was like, I can't write anymore. I'm not good anymore. I'm so rusty, like, so I wasn't playing for so many years. But 2020, doing that music residency, I had to practice. I had to learn so many covers. I had, which was awesome because it started getting my wheels turning of different like chord progressions and different like styles of, and I was like trying to figure out like what people like, because it's a hotel. So there's a
Right.
lot of like travelers coming in and out. So I was like, okay, I want to keep it like wide enough where people will know the songs and like be able to like sing along. So I was doing like old rock covers, I was doing pop songs, I was doing original stuff too that I was writing because I was playing like every week.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of nuts. Like 2020 is really what prompted me making this album, and like that whole experience of like forcing me to sit down and play every single week, and just all these songs started coming out, like, and I was just, it was the isolation too, like I had nothing else to do, and I started writing like crazy. And then not that long after, Bill, my engineer, like reached out. He had seen me posting like videos and stuff online, and he's like, I had posted just like me playing Everything Is Fine, the first song that I released. And he's like, I really like that song. I'd love to have you in the studio. Let's do a song free. Like, let's just see if we work well together. And then we did work really well together. And from that point on, it was just like, it kind of started slowly turning into an album. And so now, it's been a while. We've been recording a while, but now we've had the third song out, and it's like, I'm still like wrapping my head around the fact that I'm making an album right now. It's like still
Yeah.
hasn't like, it's still like kind of unreal to me, and I'm still trying to figure out like, how do I do this? Like, what am I doing? But it's really fun though.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one, that is a hell of a story. Like I think I remember, I mean, COVID's a big blur, right? Like the whole, I would say year and a half, 2 years or whatever, between just being at home a lot, maybe on my end, maybe drinking a little too much when I would look at social, or whatever else. But I do remember you posted like some picture of like your view like out of and I figured, because I figured it was like you got some cool weekend gig or something, but it was like a full residency at a hotel, like,
Year and a
yeah.
half.
Wait, okay, so it was a whole year and a half that you were there. Okay, so
Yes.
that's what you were saying. So you were saying that they thought you were going to be there and it'd be like a 3 month thing or whatever, and then it
Well,
turned
they
into the
thought
whole.
COVID was going to be over in 3 months.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Program usually lasts about a year and a half.
That's
But
so cool.
they were like, well, because they were thinking about scrapping it, I guess, because they were like, well, this COVID thing, like, what's going on? But they were like, well, our residents really like the program, and when this is over, when at the time we thought in 3 months, we'll have the musician ready to go, and like that didn't happen. But what ended up happening, it was really strange, but also like I feel like it was kind of good because my nerves were so like, because I hadn't performed in so long, like I was so nervous all the time. But everything was distant. So like the first summer, I think it was like, everything was like the 6 feet, everything far apart. So I was performing like pretty far away, like
Yeah.
and it was all outdoor shows, like everything had to be spaced out, which was kind of nice because like my social anxiety, like having people like right in front, like just getting back into it, but everybody was kind of like at a distance and everyone was really nervous about COVID. So it was like people weren't as, so I was just kind of in the corner, like playing my little shows.
Yeah.
And then the winter hit, still didn't, this was like, I guess, March or April when I moved in there.
Okay.
So I did like all these like spaced out outdoor shows. And then winter hit, and we couldn't do indoor shows. It was like that was like the worst of it. So I was doing like Zoom performances. Like people could log on and like
So weird,
watch the
right?
Zoom performance. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was so weird, but like I mean it was cool though because that was like my job. Like that
Yeah.
became my job, is like I just writing songs or coming up with like covers and then engaging with the residents, and like so that was like all I focused on for that whole year, which was like crazy. I mean, what a gift, just to like
Yeah.
be able to immerse yourself in your art. And the world is already isolated anyway, so there's no distractions. There was nothing I could do. Like, yeah, I was living downtown in like, the heart of like downtown Chicago, but there was nothing I could do except sit in this like gorgeous high rise and play guitar.
Right,
And
right.
like,
Which I guess there's worse places to find inspiration, right? Like
yeah,
that would
it was,
be talk about, the kind of the second turnaround for your music passion is just like, being able to be in like this beautiful area, and what else are you going to do but play guitar and sing, right? Like what,
yeah.
what else are you going to do? So that's like the biggest silver lining to a global pandemic ever, I guess. Right.
Oh, 100%. And like the whole time, it was like the imposter syndrome was so hard. Like it was just like, first of all, it's already kind of hard to consistently do art, to like go into that space, and it was like
Mhm.
everything got cleared out of my way. I also decided to not drink that year, so I was just like completely like sober with my feelings in this like gorgeous environment. And like you realize like every excuse that you have of like not doing your work or your art is like it's all bullshit. Like I had, for the longest time I was like, "Oh, I'm working, I'm in school, it's like there were so many excuses, and like I felt like life literally cleared it all out of my way and was like, "Now what? Like here you have this amazing opportunity. You have an entire year to just focus on music." And I was like, "Oh my god, my nerves." It was like that was the hardest part I think about the whole thing, and just like almost being like, "Am I supposed to be here? Like am I supposed to be in this
Right.
this beautiful high rise? Like what am I doing here?" It was so weird, but I'm so grateful that that happened. I'm so grateful for that program because there's
Yeah.
not a lot of programs like that that support artists in that way.
No way. Yeah. You wish, right? It'd be great to see that more often, where people were given some time and some money to perform. And, if you've got the talent, you've got the chops for it and all that
Yeah,
kind of
I wish
stuff.
like
And
every high rise in downtown would do that and have like a
yeah,
resident artist. That would be so cool.
I think like some of those places, some high rise, area in a main, downtown metropolitan area, like don't quite get like how special people still find it to hear a good live performer like that. And like a very, we're not talking some loud jamming hard rock band or something, just somebody being able to play guitar or piano or have a small band or something and play songs. Like people eat that up more than you think. It's
Oh
like
my
when you still
god.
it's like when you still see a wedding band in the era of DJs and and Spotify playlists, where like people
Yeah.
walk away loving it like 20 times more,
Especially after like the whole COVID thing. Like I had several people like crying. Like after we did the whole winter, and like there was live music died and there was no live music, like the first like few shows I started playing outside, like people were just like they didn't even care what I was playing. They were just like, "Oh my god, it's like to hear live music, like this is amazing. Like I haven't heard live music like for a year." So it was
hmm
like it was kind of special that like little time where people were, and I really think that I've noticed that there's just so much more work for musicians. Like there's just so many more paid gigs and just opportunities to play in, like I've noticed sports bars are always having like acoustic artists. And I wonder if it was like because of COVID, because like we went a year or maybe more without live music, and now it seems like there's such a industry for it, and it's everywhere. Like I've get more gigs now, like even just doing acoustic nights at a random bar or whatever, way more so than I ever used to see.
Well, and yeah, I think you're right on that. I think, I've talked to some local people, people that do local shows in their areas or people that do touring, and even on the touring end, like people will talk about that it's a problem, but it's a different type of problem, that there's so many shows in the city on a given basis that you're trying to make sure that the potential fan base you have will come to yours and not the one
Yeah.
across the street, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just like everyone, even now, it's been a bit since things have been obviously opened up for a while. We're talking, over a year or whatever, but like even then, people are still like, you're absolutely right. Like to hear the things you're talking about with the first shows coming back after that winter, like people really are I think were really shown in their isolation time what they really love. And it's like, anyone that's a music fan, it was connection with live music, right? And like, you might have totally taken that for granted, not gone to local shows prior to COVID, maybe only gone to some headliner gig or something like that. But man, afterwards, I think people are just loving like the authenticity and like the human connection. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm seeing like I feel like there's something growing, like this music scene in Chicago and the Chicago suburbs. Like I'm starting to really feel this like support and like people coming out and supporting other bands' shows and like I don't know, it seems like there's something like that's like about to bloom here. Or I mean not
yeah,
about to, it's already blooming, but it's really cool to see.
which is cool to hear, because depending upon the quote unquote scene of music, the type of music in a given scene in Chicago or another big city or something like that, it felt like I was somebody that played probably more shows before, prior to COVID than I do now, just with work and everything else. But it felt like in some areas that I'd played shows in for years that it was kind of dissipating a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you would play some of the same shows or with some of the same bands you used to, or find some new bands, and like the numbers were dwindling, or it was harder to find shows, or you'd play a pretty good venue on a good night and it seemed like it was a little lackluster on the crowd attendance. And that is not what I'm hearing now, like,
Mhm.
which is so cool. And to bring it, to loop it in, and here's my great segue, so you bring up like shows and live music and stuff. I know you and your band, which I know a few of the members from pretty well. You guys are playing a couple of upcoming shows in Chicago.
Yeah.
I know the first one is in about a week and a couple days, on the
Yeah, next week, next Saturday.
21st, right? Yeah. Is that
Mhm.
the one at Reggie's, right?
Yep.
And who are the
Oh, yeah,
people that you're
Reggie's
playing
actually
with?
has my calendar right here because my brain is I
Yeah,
don't know.
no, you're good. Take your time. But,
So I Reggie's on the 21st, and
uh-huh.
that's with the Vultures, who I've become really good friends with. They're an awesome local band. And then another singer-songwriter, Arrayas, who I have not met yet, but I'm so excited to meet her. I've seen videos of her. She's just like an awesome performer. She's an awesome writer. And then February is Cubby Bear, February 9th, also with the Vultures.
Oh, cool.
And you know what? Like, there's a whole bunch of shows coming up, like basically this whole year. But those are the two big ones that are coming up.
Awesome. Well, Reggie's and Cubby Bear are two really good places for people to go to, and also great venues to play. Like, I only played each one of those once, but I know like the Cubby Bear is a fun one. Like, if you can do
Yeah,
that, if you can do that on a weekend, or even hell half the time on a weekday, it's a good
well,
time, right by Wrigleyville
what's
and all
crazy
that
is I
stuff.
didn't even realize this, but so I'm playing Cubby Bear St. Patrick's Day weekend
Oh
in
shit.
with a band called the All Right Maybes. They're awesome. But I didn't even realize that that was St. Patrick's Day weekend until one of my bandmates like brought it up, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And they're like, "Yeah, that show's gonna be crazy." And I was like,
Yeah.
"That is. We need to
That'll
like mentally prepare ourselves."
Yeah, that'll be a fun one, man. Like, cause Cubby Bear can get wild, but it can get wild in a good way. It can
Especially
be in a fun
St.
way.
Patrick's Day weekend. I mean, you know,
Yeah. Oh
Chicagoans
God.
take that very seriously.
Oh yeah, and you know how Chicagoans get on like a night on a halfway decent weekend in areas like
Yeah,
Wrigleyville or downtown. You
yeah.
just oh man,
I'm
that's
kind of
great though.
scared, but excited, but a
I'm
little scared.
Oh, it'll be a good time, and you're all great musicians and you're great live, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. It'll be a good time. Well, thanks a lot, Kelsey, for coming on and talking about some of these things. I hope anyone that's listening, if you haven't, check out the last three singles, especially the newest one, "I Sold My Soul." Very good song, has a good message with kind of a lot of the things we've talked about on here, so it's a good thing to check out. Where can people look for you, look for your music, and kind of look for where you do announcements for live shows or new songs and things of that nature?
Yeah, they can find the music on all the streaming sites, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Amazon, all that. Mostly, I post most of my updates on Instagram. I want to try to get a website going soon, but I need to find, if you know any or anyone watching knows any people that can help me with a website, that would be amazing. But yeah, so for now, I pretty much just post on Instagram, and my handle is Kelsey Montanez _.
Okay, perfect. Well, make sure to check out Kelsey on there. And at the end of this, podcast, we'll also play "I Sold My Soul" at the end if you haven't listened to it already. And Kelsey, thanks a lot for coming on. This was really great to catch up with you and kind of hear how music's been going the last couple of years. It's great to hear.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
To make believe that if I did, we'd be happy. But now I'm dancing by myself, and you look for me in someone else. I did not know where I would go. I'm sick of playing it safe. They asked me if I'd risk it, 'cause they know I'd say yeah. So you don't know why I have changed. It took me down, baby. I sold my soul to make believe that if I did, we'd be happy. But now I'm dancing by myself, and you look for me in someone else. But if I never can return, I hope you looked at me and learned. My God, I'll never be the same. I'm skin and bones, I'm just a name. To make believe that if I did, we'd be happy. But now I'm dancing by myself, and you look for me in someone else. But if I never can return,